Hey everyone, it's me. Today I'm going to be talking about Outlast, but not in a classic review sense. I'm more going to be talking about Outlast in reference to a point I kind of want to make about jump scares and how I'm really growing tired of them, and the reasons why. I predict a lot of dislikes on this video, but you know what, I'm okay with that. I know a lot of you really liked Outlast. For me personally, it just didn't do anything for me. It felt really unoriginal in a lot of aspects. I will talk about that, and I will mention a few of those things throughout this video, but for the most part I just wanted to talk about jump scares and why I'd be happy to never ever see them ever again in a video game. Now, Outlast relies very heavily, if not completely, on jump scares to try and scare the player. This is fine, but the problem with jump scares, the problem I've always had with jump scares, is you can easily telegraph them once you learn the formula. And don't you notice, for those of you who are very familiar with horror in general, that when a formula is used, it never really deviates from that. If it ever changes up the formula, it'll only ever be maybe once within the entire fiction that they've created to just kind of give you an extra jolt. So what you get is what you can expect for the rest of it, which is a main issue that I have with Outlast. I'm trying to think of jump scare formulas that I can use as an example. Think, Megan, think. Okay, I've got one. Say, for example, in one sequence or scene within a game, or a movie, it works both ways, there's plenty of ambient music going on in the background, or maybe just sounds, you know, you can hear fans spinning or a kettle boiling, or there's something going on, there's sound there. And you'll notice that suddenly, without you noticing it, the sound will have dipped into just nothing. It'll be deathly quiet. And it'll be deathly quiet for about, I don't know, 4 or 5 seconds. It's always silent for a certain period of time. And when that certain period of time is over, something will just pop out and scare you silly. In some cases it's completely the opposite. It will be completely quiet, or it'll be, you know, the sound levels will be normal, it won't be particularly intrusive. But then suddenly ambient music will start. It'll be violins, it'll be that'll chime in, and again, you know something bad's coming. I mean, if you watch Paranormal Activity 1, I can't remember the other movies very well, but if you listen really carefully, any time the demon is about to appear or something bad's about to happen, you can hear a kind of low rumble. It sort of sounds like a train is coming. And again, it all fits within this time period. Sometimes it varies, but you can guarantee after you're hearing this music or you're hearing this scary ambient sound, something bad is going to happen, and it does. Sometimes as well, these signposts aren't centered around music or ambient sound. Sometimes it's actual shots that you're looking at, sort of through the view or through the camera. If a camera is set in a certain way, or maybe a certain angle, you can predict that something's going to sort of pop up behind the protagonist or in front of the protagonist, or, you know, maybe it's something they're doing. Outlast was very, very similar to that. It used a formula that after the initial scare of, oh, something just popped out at me, you build up a tolerance because you know when they're coming, and that's exactly what happened with me. Not only did Outlast really rely on these kinds of jump scares, but it relied on creating boogeymen that when they pounced out at you, you were supposed to be, you know, terrified or intimidated if they were nearby. I mean, I know for the big bald-headed dude with the scary teeth, he had a piece of music, sort of a theme. So every time you could hear the music, you knew that that guy was in the vicinity. You could also hear him rattling chains. And I suppose that was supposed to build tension, but after you see him, and you see him a lot, it shatters any sort of illusion or fear of this thing that you might have had. It's the, I'm pretty sure Stephen King said it once, where the build-up is always great, and then you see the monster, and all of a sudden your imagination is unchallenged. You think, oh, okay, well, that's only a 10-foot bug. I thought it was going to be a 50-foot bug. And I feel that Outlast kind of tripped up at that same hurdle as well. You start getting used to the enemy types that come after you, and they become less scary because you see them so often. I really don't feel that the story is particularly original either. I don't even find the camera thing particularly original. And I'm sure that doesn't help because I was watching a lot of horror. I go on horror binges quite regularly. I'll take to Netflix or Amazon Prime or any DVD rental company that exists, and I'll just pick up horror titles that I've never heard of before, and I'll just watch them through. And I did that with Netflix shortly before I think Outlast was announced. And I saw so many movies that were so very similar to Outlast. Session 9, Apartment 143, Grave Encounters 2, Death of a Ghost Hunter. They were all found footage, and half of them were set in an asylum. I also saw American Horror Story Asylum, which probably didn't help much either. I also really wasn't a big fan of the handycam mechanic, which I guess was like a large part of how you played the game. When you're in a really dark area, you turn on the night vision illuminated green thing so you can see, I don't know what it's called. And it's supposed to create tension and make things challenging because you really can't see very well, and what you can see is very fuzzy. But for me, it didn't add tension, it just made things really awkward and annoying. My eyes hurt so bad at the end of that game because I literally spent half of it, if not all of it, doing this. The gameplay itself I found to be quite generic as well. I mean, I can't count the number of times I had to turn valves. The best part in the game for me was when you're running from a large group of inmates, and it sort of has this, you know, Terminator 2 Pescadero escape sort of feel to it, in the sense that you have to go through these doors, okay, to get away from this mob. But to get through the door you have to move a heavy object away from it to go through, and then move another heavy object on the other side back so they can't, you know, get through very quickly. And you just have to do that, and you're climbing up, and you can hear them in the background going, "Go round, go round!" It was this race, almost, this race against time. Were you going to beat them? Were you going to be faster than them? And considering how frustrating and how awkward and kind of cheat-worthy the game can be, it made that sequence all the more brilliant. And it wasn't scary, it was tense, it was really tense. But that was probably the only section in the game where I ever really felt on edge. Everything else, like I said, was just kind of horror by numbers. I also want to note here that I found the marketing sort of strategy for Outlast very interesting. It mirrored the marketing campaign for Paranormal Activity. If any of you are familiar with those movies and the trailers, you know, the trailers rely on audience reactions to build up hype, I suppose. You know, you see all of these people watching this movie and they're screaming and they're clambering to grab their boyfriends and their friends, and popcorn's being thrown everywhere because obviously what they're seeing is so terrifying they just can't contain themselves. It felt very similar with Outlast. I saw a lot of trailers that involved gamers on YouTube and people within the, I say the industry, more like the games journalism industry, playing this game and screaming and hollering and freaking out and reacting in these absurdly crazy ways. Just food for thought. I'm not necessarily saying anything here, I just thought it was unusual that these found footage horrors would be very similar in their marketing, considering they're sort of completely different mediums. So that was it for this video. I just finished Outlast and I really wanted to talk about it, and it got me to thinking about what horror I like and what horror I don't like, and why perhaps I feel I had the reaction I did, which wasn't a particularly good one. I wouldn't say I hated it, it was just kind of mediocre for me. Thanks for watching, I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.